Hello there, people. Welcome to another episode of Flight Chat, the listener feedback show for the FLITEcast. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope you all have had a decent weekend, depending on where you're at in the world. Not a ton of emails this particular week, but one of them is Dorsey-sized, because it's from Mr. Dorsey himself, so be prepared for that one. You know he always has a lot to go through, a lot to cover when he emails in. All of you do, truthfully, but he certainly is the originator of what we affectionately call here the Dorsey-sized email. So let's dive headfirst into this week's feedback without further ado. And John R. once again leads us off. He doesn't really send Dorsey-sized emails a ton, but he does send multiple emails a lot. And he's got more than a few this particular week. Let's start with this first one, titled Fun Things to Talk About, which is a little lengthy, but let's see what he's got. First, he says, won't have too many emails this week, but I had a few ideas to discuss. All right. He says, one of them is debating whether or not to use this what if for a future episode. Yes, that's right. John R. is our resident what if individual as well. Lots of hypothetical situations he loves to come up with. He says, what if Power Rangers had adapted a Super Sentai series that they didn't adapt? But I think before I do, should I ask how much do you know about Super Sentai? Have you ever watched it? The show that was adapted into Power Rangers for the West. If you have, I'll be happy to do one next show. If not, maybe it's too ambitious to share on this show. Yeah, I have not. I'm familiar with the term Super Sentai, but no, cannot say that I have ever watched it whatsoever. So no, I am not terribly familiar with that. Sorry to squash that a bit. Yeah, I'm unaware. I'm sure someone around here is, but not me, unfortunately. So number two, the what if scenario he did decide to do this week will be a lot shorter than his hypothetical for a Mask 2. Yeah, that was a little lengthy. But he says, what if Bruce Timm made a show or direct-to-video movie bridging the gap between Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures? He says it was a little confusing at first when they started changing the looks of the characters. I know they did it to match the animation style of Superman the Animated Series, but I think it would have been cool to have made a direct-to-video film or two that goes from the old animation and appearances to the new show. Call it Batman for All Seasons or something like that, he says. I don't think you need to explain it for too many characters, and yeah, there were tie-in comics that explain some of it, but hey, if they can adapt Mad Love into an episode, even though they use new Batman Adventures for it, then I don't see why it has to 100% be like the comic versions. Well, of course not. It's all Elseworlds, it's all adaptations. That goes for cartoons as well. But going forward, going further here, he says, for example, Batman, Alfred, Batgirl, Harley Quinn, Nightwing, Robin 2, or 3, maybe Jason was Robin in one of these films, the Scarecrow, Penguin, Mr. Freeze, Catwoman, Clayface, Scarface, Ventriloquist, the Riddler, Bane, Commissioner Gordon, Bullock, and Montoya don't really need an explanation. They just get new wardrobes. That's very specific, but all right, I'm with you on this so far. He says like maybe the Mad Hatter got shorter because maybe he invented something to try and shrink Batman, but ended up shrinking himself by 2 feet. I feel like height you don't really need to explain either. It's just it's a different design, truthfully. But maybe that goes into what my answer's eventually going to be here later. But he says, Killer Croc and Poison Ivy turn green as some side effect to their condition. Joker looks like Roger Klotz from the show Doug. That's right, yes, the eyes. That's what it is, the black eyes, right? Because Roger, I absolutely remember Roger from Doug, no doubt. And that is a similar look. Clown because maybe Andrea Beaumont messed him up really badly and he covered his face to hide up the damages. Okay, all right. It would be a cool idea to make Jason a character in this, he says. I would change his origins to make it lighter. I wouldn't have him be another acrobat, nor would I have him steal any Batwheels. I'd just make him a fan that watches all the new coverages. Decides to create a makeshift Robin costume. Would be cool if it was the Tim Drake costume to connect to Tim later. He also lives with his grandma, he says. Oh, and I'd give him his original red hair so he's distinct from Dick and Tim. Basically, he's acting like Incrediboy Buddy Syndrome to Batman's Mr. Incredible. Batman doesn't want another sidekick. He continues to show up when he's unwelcome, and this takes place for a year, hence the All Seasons title. Maybe instead of being killed by the Joker, he's trying to help him find the Joker, but Batman tells him to go away and that he doesn't want another sidekick. Jason has a sad look in his eye. I was only trying to help, he says, and walks away with his head down. He says Batman shows a slight sign of regret. Out of nowhere, Joker grabs Jason and threatens to throw him off a ledge unless Batman stops chasing him. Batman is quickly able to apprehend Joker and grabs Jason before he's dropped off the ledge and grabs him, but then Joker throws a laughing gas bomb in Batman's direction and Jason blocks it with his face. Batman punches Joker off the roof but catches his foot with his grappling hook, kind of like he did in The Dark Knight. Batman cradles Jason, who begins to have an uncontrollable laughter. Jason, Jason, as he takes his mask off, the laughter continues to build until we see tears in his eyes and he passes out with a grin and is out in a vegetative state. He says, well, that's dark, John, okay? Batman's eyes widen and tries to take him to a hospital. He takes him to Leslie Thompson so nobody knows he's dressed up as Robin and is put under her care. She gives him Jason's Robin costume and he displays it in the cave next to Dick's. I don't think I can handle another one, he says to Alfred, which kind of foreshadows what happens to Tim in Return of the Joker. Yeah, it's really close to that, truthfully. Really, really close to that. He says, I can't tell if my idea is too dark, but I think this would be a better story idea than Joker beating Jason to death, and it wouldn't be a direct adaptation of Death in the Family, since Jason wasn't really considered family, but it fits with the Joker. Every time Batman loses a Robin, the Joker has something to do with it. Like in Things Change, Batman, Batgirl, and Robert are going after the Joker. Joker mutilates Tim and does horrible things to Jason and Barbara in the comics. Do you have any thoughts? My initial thought on all of that, John, another very complex what if, but my initial thought is I don't really need an explanation for the animation change. Because to me, I remember when I was younger and that happened, yes, it was off-putting for me, but it wasn't so much the change in the animation that was off-putting. It was really all the other fundamental stuff that had changed that was off-putting, starting with the Batmobile. That was, to this day, that's still the biggest thing that bothered me with respect to the change from the animated series to the new Batman adventures, right? Is just change the car. And I really liked the old car. And that's not to say that the car that he got was a bad one. It's just Batman the Animated Series is arguably my favorite Batmobile. I love that design. It's very sleek. It's very stylish and still very imposing and foreboding. And I know it's lengthy, but still I just really dig the design of that car. And I did not like that they changed it. That really pissed me off when I was younger. So there was that. Plus, I really like Dick Grayson as Robin. He's my favorite Robin. And so when they changed that to Tim, that was off-putting as well. There were just other fundamental changes outside of the animation style that bug me. To me, the animation style is really more along the lines of when a different writing team and artist comes in for a book, right? Like when someone comes in for a new Batman book, Tom King is replaced by, I don't know who replaced Tom King after Rebirth, or if someone comes in and do Detective Comics after James Tynion the Fourth or whatever, and the art style changes, right? It's going to be a different look. You're going to have different artists. You're going to have different, techniques, if you will, and that's to me is really what I equated it to. So I personally don't need this what if. I don't need, at least not for the animation style changes, right? I mean, thematically speaking, it didn't bug me, right? Because the voices were still the same. Most notably Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy, right? Those are the big voice changes or the big voice actors where it's okay, you've got to cross them over. You've got to carry them through. And also Lauren Lester as well, right? If he's going to be Nightwing, yes, totally make that progression. But those are all things that they could, explain the way that they did as the show progressed. And, in retrospect, I get why the changes were made because they were expanding the universe. It was no longer just Batman the Animated Series in Gotham. Now it was Superman involving Metropolis. And that eventually led them to Justice League, which I still haven't watched. Still need to watch Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. But the DCAU was growing. It was expanding. And so I understood, just, again, because of the way that they do in the comics, I understood where the change came from as far as the animation style and, how it progressed the way that it did. And I don't personally need this particular what if, but perhaps somebody else that wants those blanks fill in, they'd dig it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's all subjective. It's just not one that I personally necessarily need for the animation change. All right, so on to John's third point here in his first email. He says, so while I'm not against the idea of Pattinson being integrated into the DCU, it does seem like it would be less of a headache to try and make a new Batman entirely. I mean, if Pattinson just played two different variants of Batman, that could work too, but I don't see that happening. Robert has other films he wants to do and wouldn't have time to play two separate versions of Bruce Wayne. Whoever the next actor ends up being, I do think the costume has to look very different from the crime saga. I think if the costume was heavily inspired by the Arkham Games suit, that would work. I'm honestly not a fan at all, truthfully, of Pattinson crossing over. If it was something that they eventually decided to do, I'd live with it, but I'm not a fan of it. And there's a couple of reasons I'm not a fan of it, I think I've mentioned before, is number one, I'm tired of the fans consistently clamoring for it, because that's just a silly thing, in my opinion. And, this isn't me trying to, squash enthusiasm, right? Because someone's going to come at me and be like, well, Ray, all we want is the Batman that we really like from this universe to cross over with the DCU. What's wrong with that? Isn't that being positive? No, it's being lazy, is what it is. Because and not only that, it's abridging creative freedom. And that's a point that I will continue to stand on, right? James Gunn and Peter Safran are creating the DCU in their own image, and they're bringing in creatives to help fulfill that image, and tell their own stories at the same time. So that means that they've already got an idea what DCU Batman's going to be. And as far as we know, it's not Robert Pattinson. Now, if James Gunn changes his mind and decides to make it that way, okay. But here's my issue. Aesthetically speaking, from what we've seen so far with Superman, I don't see how the Batman from Robert Pattinson fits into that. And you brought up very perfectly there, John, the costume change. Like, his costume doesn't match. And I know people have tried to do this with, Photoshop and, putting this there, but the costume and the tones don't match. Pattinson's Batman is grittier. Pattinson's Batman is more grounded. The Batman that exists in the DCU, it's the same thing that we went through when Affleck was named as Batman in the DCEU. The whole reason that he had to eat copious amounts of Orange Ruffy and bulk up to the way that he did is because he had to portray a larger-than-life Batman that was sharing the screen with Superman. That was in a universe where a Justice League existed, right? Not just a Superman, but also a Wonder Woman, an Aquaman, a Cyborg, and a Flash. That is a Batman that can't just be gritty, grimy, 2 years into the Gotham Project Robert Pattinson, right? That doesn't fit in that regard, right? I mean, yes, he's got the strength. Yes, but there's too much of the gritty groundedness, right? I don't even think Bale's would work, truthfully. Like Bale's Batman, for all the people that say that Bale is their favorite, I don't even think his works, right? And I remember there was a time where we thought that because Superman Returns, was released in 2006, that there might even be a crossover there, and that Brandon Routh would be, crossover with Christian Bale. The reason, just aesthetically speaking, it doesn't fit. You got to have a Batman that, at this point in the DCU, has been established. And I don't know how long, right? Because we still have to figure out time frames with respect to the DCU. But we know that this DCU already has a Superman, a Guy Gardner Green Lantern, a Mr. Terrific, a Hawkgirl. And that's just in terms of the heroes, right? Never mind the villainy that we know is already well established in this DCU, right? So Batman's got to fit that. So not only for, creative freedom's sake, but also for the sake of a Batman, building a Batman that matches the tone that they're setting up in the DCU, I think it's got to be someone different. And I don't think it's more of a hassle to create something different. I don't think that's more of a hassle at all. I think it's more of a hassle to try and bring Pattinson into it, because now you're pissing off Matt Reeves, or you're infringing upon whatever plans he has with respect to the Batman Epic Crime Saga. And I don't want to hear all this shit about how, well, he's got other stuff going on and who knows when that's going to happen. Yeah, you know what? Pack your patience, Batman fans. I've said that before and I will say it again. Pack your patience. I'm going to do one more turn to the right, and I'm going to look at my collection of Batman cinema and tell you that we have nothing to complain about. We have nothing to be impatient about. 3 years ago, yes, we got the Batman. Yes, it was fantastic. And yes, we got the Penguin follow-up after that. That is the 6th interpretation of Batman that we Batman fans have had since 1989. Be patient. Seriously, we have dominated, Batman fans, we have dominated the landscape with respect to live-action DC interpretations for decades on the big screen. We can afford to wait a little longer. And we can also afford to let James Gunn and Peter Safran and those involved creatively in the DCU figure out their own plans for what their Batman is going to be without us infringing our own beliefs on it for once, right? I don't think it would be more difficult, or less difficult rather, to incorporate Pattinson in. I think it would be more difficult because of his schedules, because you would screw with whatever's going on in the Batman Epic Crime Saga. And no longer am I buying this ridiculousness about confusion in terms of, well, who's going to be Batman? Who's this? No. There have been so many Batman actors that I don't think people are going to get confused. I think people are just going to look at it and go, well, I like Pattinson, but let's try so-and-so, right? Like, that's just where we're at. Or maybe we're just gonna, history will repeat itself, and one more time we'll get an actor where it's like, how could that actor can't be Batman, da da da. That's more than likely what's gonna happen, because fans are fickle and they forget all the stupid shit that they've done, like historically speaking, over the last however many generations with a new actor playing a character. But yeah, the suit's gotta look totally different, and whoever it is, I want it to be whoever James Gunn and the creatives involved in the DCU want it to be. They've already got an idea. They do. They've already got an idea. They've already got a plan. They've already got something that they're setting up. And they're not starting with Batman. They're starting with Superman. So let's begin with where they're beginning, and let's let them go from there instead of trying to force the issue because we're so impatient to get more Batman. Not you, John. Just saying in general, that's why I'm not in favor of Pattinson being incorporated into the DCU, because I'm tired of the studios listening to fans. Listen to themselves. Trust the creatives instead of trying to trust the loudmouth fans that are just fickle and, just want to pout if they don't get their way in that regard. So those are my strong feelings on that. How about number 4? With respect to John R.'s first email, he says, I'm also someone not thrilled about the Williams score being reused. I've said it once and I'll say it again. There are several songs sung about Superman over the years. They could have used an orchestrated version of any of them. Like, I found a cool orchestra version of Three Doors Down Kryptonite version that would have been epic for the marketing or even the movie itself. That being said, he says this remake isn't this remake isn't a deal breaker for me either. If MCU Spider-Man can have a remake of the 60s Spider-Man show theme and MCU X-Men seem to be reusing 90s animated theme, then okay, fine, Superman can have a modern version. At least they aren't copy and pasting like they did with Superman Returns. I largely agree with everything you said. It is unfortunate that on some level they don't feel like we can get away from the Williams theme with the Superman interpretation. I also don't like the empowerment that it gives the gatekeepers and the pearl clutchers with respect to Superman the movie. This just goes into the argument of Superman only has one theme. It should only ever be the Williams theme. Yeah, screw all of that. That's not how you guys felt about Neil Hefti's Batman theme, now is it? Or maybe you do. Maybe you're okay if the Batman 66 theme accompanies Batman in the Batman. Or, maybe is that what the DCU Batman should do, right? If we're going to follow that logic, how about this? For all the people that want Pattinson to carry over, for all the people that have these grand designs on the DCU Batman, is that what you want? You want him to have the Batman 66 theme? That's iconic. That is arguably, the Batman 66 theme is arguably the most iconic Bat theme out there. It is. It is. Right? Even more so than Danny Elfman's theme from Batman 89. Think about it, right? You ask people to sing the Batman theme, what are they going to say? More than likely, they're going to say, na 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 Batman, right? The Simpsons did it, okay? So if that's where we're going with this, if that's how you feel about it, then you've got to carry that to term with respect to that. You don't want to do that now, do you? I don't think so. Not at all. So, but yeah, you're right. It's not just a straight copy and paste job. It does feel like there's some innovation. I am curious about that second composer that they brought in for additional music and how that's going to add to John Murphy's score. So, what changes did they decide to make? Because I'm not saying they made no changes based on some of these alleged test screenings that happened, but the idea that they made these incredibly grand, sweeping, wholesale changes, no. I think that's been soundly debunked and not at all how it's going to go with respect to that. But either way. Also, number 5, John did want to say thank you, Wally, for reaching out. Wally, you did have some kind words for him with respect to some of the more personal stuff that John R. was sharing with us last week on our last episode of Flight Chat. And Wally, you did appreciate that because he's also been sharing some personal stuff as far as some of his personal battles, mental health, and whatnot that have been going on. Because this, of course, is a safe space for that. John also did send the link for that Three Doors Down Kryptonite song, and I agree with you. It is epic. It is awesome. It is fantastic. It's unfortunately, as far as the general audience is concerned, not as iconic. So that's what I've always said from a marketing sense. I get where they're coming from with respect to attaching the Williams theme. I just do not like the idea that it's the only Superman theme, or it's the Superman theme. Like, we've got to stick to it. Like, we can branch out from it at some point. And so, again, my hope is that they're using it to get people in the gate for Cornswet, and then at some point, should his movie succeed and should the DCU get going, that they will alter it and give him his own theme down the road because he deserves his own theme, as far as I'm concerned. Here's hoping, fingers crossed. We'll see how that goes. But otherwise, yeah, we're just going to have to grin and bear the reboot and the reworking, the different organization, the different arrangement, the different arrangement of the Williams theme in this regard. One of John's other emails that he sent was actually a correction. He meant the episode Old Wounds, Not Things Change, and I had to read that this way because I honestly didn't catch that because I don't remember the title of that episode that he's talking about. I do remember the episode he's talking about, but I don't remember that title. I have only watched Batman Beyond all the way through once. And I do own it, so maybe on a rewatch, I'll catch that later. But either way, let's get to the rest of John R's emails. for this week. He's got one here titled Skynet is Real and in its Infancy, They're Trolling Nerds. This sounds a little ominous. He says, initially when you said all these bots are from a computer farm, I didn't know that's what literally is happening. Even AI is trolling us? Well, I'll just assume they're all bots then. That's how I'll block them, he says. I won't even share their screenshot. Hey, how about I do you one better? I'll tag you when I see it on Threads. No, thank you. You've done that a couple of times this week, John. I don't need to. You don't need to do that. I don't care to do that. Unless, because quite honestly, to be honest with you, most of the ones that you've sent me, I've already blocked, and I'll find them. And the thing is, if I don't find them, then the thing is, I'll find them eventually, and I will block them at that point. I don't need to be tagged in them. That's okay. You can leave me out of that. No, thank you. I wish you not to do that. Truthfully. But he does say, I encourage Anthony, Brooklyn, Batman, and anyone else. I suggest we do this strategy too. I was tempted to respond to someone who made a tier list with Batman and Robin in C tier and BVS in F tier, but I resisted temptation and blocked. Now that's good. That is awesome. Because all of it is just attention whoring, and they're all just trying to steal our attention. That's why the bot farms exist. That's why the trolls exist, because they're all just trying to steal our attention and divert us away from the other things that actually give us joy. So screw that. Don't give them any attention. Don't highlight any of what they say. Don't encourage it. Don't boost it whatsoever in that regard. John says, I was thinking of doing this all the time, but I didn't want to badger you all the time. I'm more than just DC Discourse 24/7, as you know. But perhaps so, I'm giving you a break more often. I'll tag Anthony, Brooklyn Batman, and other listeners, and you can tag me as well. I think this is going to have to be a team effort. You're a sports guy. Like, this is sports. Sometimes the quarterback or captain of the team, like you, Ray, needs to rest on the bench. It shouldn't be, come with me if you want to live. It should be, let's go together at the same time so we can all live our lives together at the same time. Almost like when the four boys from South Park took on the guy who has no life in Make Love Not Warcraft. We all team up, block these people or machines, give each other a hand. We can't let them win. What do you guys think of my idea? First of all, I think you're giving me way too much credit. I'm not a quarterback, and I'm not like a team leader here. I am a podcast host, and I just talk about these things, and I give a voice to things that I think concern me in that regard. And people can take my message for however they wish. So I appreciate the praise, if you will, but I certainly do not deserve it as far as I'm concerned in that regard. And with respect to me, like letting other people know about that, it's just because I see so many people like yourself, John, in the past that have directly responded and tried to argue these people down. It's like, no, they're not looking for an argument, or they're not looking for, you're not going to change their minds, and there's no like fruitful discussion to be had. I'm trying to save you time, because too much of social media gets bogged down in the noise and the nonsense. And the thing is, I hear what you're saying about it being a team effort, but quite honestly, the team effort is not in tagging everybody, right? It's not in just, well, okay, here, look at this. No, don't do that, right? Tagging everybody, that just creates unnecessary, like notifications and whatnot. No, what it is we're all in each other's feeds. We all have eyeballs. We all have the ability to see what we're doing. So when I screenshot something and call attention to it, like, for example, the thing I did yesterday, or the other, was it yesterday? No, it might have been the day before, but there was an account. I'll pull this up on Threads really quick here so that I can read exactly what this was. For people that didn't see it, there was an account, and this one was already shady in the first place. I imagine it's somebody's burner or something to that effect. I don't know. If not, and outright, another one of the bot farms. And of course, Threads is not loading properly because the internet sucks. There it goes. All right, thank you. There was an account that posted a statement that said Superman 1978 is a far superior movie to Man of Steel. And then on top of that, also attached their pinned review of their 4-star review of Superman 1978 on Letterboxd next to their 1-star review of Man of Steel on Letterboxd. And I screenshot that particular post. I blocked it. And then I posted, blocked without apology. No, I don't care if you agree with it or not. It's not a viewpoint I'm interested in seeing on my feed ever. It's all subjective means we don't have to agree with each other, especially if I think you posted something just to piss people off. And no, at this point, you don't get the benefit of the doubt for it just being your opinion. If you're on social media, then you know why you're doing it, and I don't have to see it if I don't want to. Simple as that. And that's kind of where I'm at with respect to social media in general. Those of us that are on it enough, we know why we're doing what we do, and we know why others do what they do. That person, I don't give a damn, like, well, I'm just sharing my opinion. No, you knew exactly what you were doing. By first making your statement, and then by providing links to your letterbox reviews side by side to show not only it's one thing if you think that Superman 78, or you think that Superman the movie from 1978, I gotta stop calling it Superman 78. It's not Superman 78, it's Superman the movie made in 1978. But it's one thing if you think that that movie is far superior to Man of Steel. That's not an issue, right? People that like that movie more than Man of Steel, okay, fine. You can go either way with it. We can say that Man of Steel is far superior to Superman the movie, right? Either way. Doesn't matter. That's not the problem. The problem is when you tell us that you gave Superman the movie 5 stars and Man of Steel 1 star. I'm not interested in your negativity. I'm not interested in your haterade in that regard, right? I don't care that that's your actual opinion. I don't. That's negative, okay? Because for me, right, here, I'll give you an example. I think Man of Steel is far superior to Superman the movie, but I own both films, and while I would give Man of Steel 5 stars, I would give Superman the movie 3.5, right? Notice how that's not 1. Notice how that's not 1.5. Notice how that's not 0. Notice how, even though I think Man of Steel is far superior, I'm still telling you I like Superman the movie. That's intriguing, right? And maybe you're somebody that doesn't like Superman the movie. Okay, that's fine. But guess what you don't have to do? You don't have to highlight to everybody how badly you thought of Superman the movie, or how badly you thought of Man of Steel in that regard. That's where I draw the line with respect to that. And no, I don't give a shit about it. Well, I'm just expressing an opinion. You know what? You can express your opinion all you like. I don't have to look at it. I do not have to pay attention to it. And the only reason that I highlight it is because when I block those people, I like showing others a reason as to why I block them. Because still we live in a time, and I don't get this a ton more, like not as much as I used to over on Twitter, but I still get people that act like they don't know what it's all subjective means. Because they don't know what it's all subjective means. Because intelligence and, you know, being scholarly in terms of like language is lacking these days. And the idea is that there are people out there, especially on social media, that assume that it's all subjective is just a cop-out, and that means, well, if you're saying it's all subjective, then you have to accept my opinion. You can't block me. You can't mute me. You have to accept what I'm saying. No, I don't. No, I do not. It's all subjective absolutely says I don't have to. It says you can say whatever you want, but I don't have to listen to it. That's exactly what it's all subjective means. You are not right or wrong. There is nothing in it's all subjective that says I got to listen to you, or that I got to pay attention to any of your bullshit. You don't have to pay attention to my bullshit either, right? You can mute me and block me to your heart's content. That is entirely up to you. If you believe that I am a pest that you need to control with blocking, that is entirely up to you. You can do that yourself, right? That is the beauty of it's all subjective. So that's why I post that. And I don't tag people in that, John, because I'm not trying to clog up your notifications. And I see what you're saying in terms of being a team effort, but I also feel like we all have our own individual accounts. It's not like we're all working for the same thing. I mean, we're all part of several different fandoms. We have several different interests, right? And there may be somebody out there, for example, I'll just go ahead and I'll throw this name out there, Zaki Hassan. Zaki Hassan is somebody that I've had like an on and off, like follow, not follow relationship with, but like on Twitter and also on Threads. There are times where he says a lot, I'd say 75 to 80%, maybe even 90% of the time, I agree with what he says. Then every once in a while, he will say something I just think is really stupid and really gatekeepery about Superman in particular. And it has to do with the Snyderverse and it has to do with the DCEU, which is the irony of that is that we have the same stance about the cultists, right? We feel the same way about the cultists. But every once in a while, he will say something that's just like, really wish you hadn't have said that. But I haven't blocked him, and I don't block him. I've unfollowed, and, there may have been times where I have muted him. I'm just being completely 100% transparent here. But I won't block him because I don't think he's a troll. I don't think that he is a bot. I know he's not a bot, right? I don't think that he is a bad person. I just do not like to see when he goes into toxic opinions. But he doesn't do it the majority of the time, and that's the thing. Is for people that we know, because Zaki, I forget. I think he and I have talked on occasion here and there. Like on social media for sure, and maybe even YouTube and in certain circles, right? Like there are times where, if it's a person that is in my circle or person that is in our circles that we know, like I am less inclined to just cast them off and be like, I never want to see their shit ever again, because I don't think they're a troll and I don't think they are, like doing things just to be inflammatory. No, he feels the way that he feels, with respect to Superman and with respect to Zack Snyder and all that. And, he's not being disingenuous about it. He's not doing it for attention. He's doing it because that's how he feels, right? And I don't agree with him, but I don't think he's being an asshole about it. I just think he genuinely feels that way. And I'm sure there are others that disagree and think that he's absolutely being an asshole about it. You know what else? Truthfully, John, it's also kind of, I remember, I'll go ahead and bring this up. You sent me an email not too long ago because I started commenting on Black Girl Nerd stuff before. And you had warned me that in the past she had some very sharp things to say about Zack Snyder. And you're right. She absolutely has. She most certainly has. Her opinions on Zack Snyder, I don't agree with a whole lot either. But I still haven't blocked her because just like Zachy, there have been a couple of times where I've interacted with her on social media, not just on the old Twitter days, but also here on Threads. There are things, 75 to 80, maybe even 90% of the time, things that she says, perfectly fine. I have no issues. I don't disagree. Or maybe I disagree to a lesser extent where it's like, I don't quite follow that point, but it's nothing that I think is block worthy in that regard. It's all about degrees, and it's all about like assessing the situation individually, not necessarily as a group, but individually. You got to treat each account individually. Some of them you're going to look at and go, oh, well, that's just a flippin' bot, right? If they don't have a picture, they don't have a profile picture, they don't have any threads of their own, if they've only been around for a couple of months or whatever, like you can tell, like there are telltale signs of this, right? And then there might even be others that, that they'll claim to you that they're real and, oh, they just don't post a whole lot because social media isn't their life. Well, a lot of times that's a bullshit excuse. But other times it's like, okay, well, if you don't post a whole lot, but this is all that you're posting is inflammatory stuff that I don't agree with, then I'm still going to treat you that particular way because I don't necessarily need to hear or see what it is that you're saying. But it's all in degrees, varying degrees, right? And we do not treat everybody the same way on social media, nor should we. We don't hit everybody with a broad brush, right? Unless it's something, unless it's a moral imperative, right? And are there really a whole lot of moral imperatives with respect to movies, TV, and other sort of media? There are some, but not a ton in that regard, right? Like there's more of that in real life, like some social media accounts that you follow that say things with respect to socioeconomics and the political theater and what's going on in the real world. That's very different. Those are very different circumstances than somebody arguing about whether or not they think Superman is far superior to Man of Steel, Superman the movie from 1978 in that regard. So it's all a matter of varying degrees, and we're all treating it differently. So that's why I say it doesn't need to be, we don't need to tag each other, John, in my opinion. We don't need to tag each other. We don't need to warn each other. We all see it. We all know. We all have our own perspectives on it. And there may come a situation, John, where, I don't block Zachy. I don't block Black Girl Nerds, but you do. Because you don't want to see their stuff, because you don't agree with me with respect to their perspective on other things that maybe we disagree with, but I don't disagree with them about, right? So maybe you will block them. So it's not quite as cut and dry in that regard. It's all about degrees in that regard. And that's another great thing about It's All Subjective, is pointing out that it's not just simple black and white. It's not just simple up and down. It's not just simple left and right. That the majority of the time when we talk about opinions and we talk about like how we feel about this stuff, it's in the gray area. It's absolutely in the gray area. And people that try to pull us into one extreme or the other, that's where I really have an issue. I despise extremes. I do not like extremes whatsoever. And as I get older, I become more and more convinced that extremes are the problem. Not just part of the problem, but the problem with respect to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you will, right? So that's my thoughts with respect to that idea. Definitely block without responding, or if you have to respond, block after you respond, so maybe your response is visible for other people, but trying to engage these bots or trolls in conversation, worthless, absolutely worthless. We have better things to do with our time, without question. All right, so a couple more emails from John here. He says, why are Fantastic Four pre-sales ahead of Superman? I'm so confused by this decision. Now, if Superman pre-sales don't crash sites like AMC or Fandango, it's going to be extremely annoying to hear people or bots go, dumbest Warner Brothers decision ever. If Superman had pre-sale tickets go live first, it would have been the one to crash ticket websites instead of Fantastic Four First Steps. Marvel reigns supreme once again. Do you think there's a perfectly logical explanation for this? All right, so here's the thing, John. First of all, before we even talk about whether or not there's a perfectly logical explanation for this, I'm going to go back to what you just said in terms of how annoying it will be to hear people or bots go, dumbest Warner Brothers decision ever, Marvel reigns supreme once again. Why are you listening to them? We just talked about who to block. We just talked about the noise to get rid of. You've got to train your algorithm better, John, to stop seeing dumb shit like that. Because anybody that says that does not know what they're talking about. Now, here's the deal. I did think about this for a second. When that happened and the Fantastic Four pre-sales went out, right? And yes, the story that they crashed the ticket websites, which to me, okay. I mean, so that tells me that like on day one, like there weren't a ton of, like people went to go buy them immediately because of the hype. All right, well here, let's just do a check here. Let's assess the situation for Fantastic Four. If I want to see Fantastic Four, I'm going to pull up my Fandango app because that's the app that I use to buy my tickets. If I pull up Fandango and I look and I got to skip through the ad for Dangerous Animals, which I'm not really that interested in seeing. I had to double check to make certain that was Jai Courtney in the first place when I first found out about it. But all right, here we go. So the Fantastic Four first steps. Looks like what we've got here as far as listings is there is the 4DX opening night fan event on July 24th. There's the First Steps XD Real D 3D fan event on the 24th. July 24th. There's the IMAX opening night fan event on July 24th as well. And then the big one opening on July 25th. All right, let's never mind the fan events. Let's just go to the openings on July 25th, right? So in my area, let's go to my neighborhood theater, the one that I don't go to anymore because I had a bad experience last year at Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Let's go there. All right, so on July 24th, the Thursday prior, they will have a 3 p.m. IMAX 3D showing at my neighborhood theater. They've also got a 7 p.m. 3D showing, but let's just take it. Let's go to the 7 p.m., right? Let's look at the 7 p.m. 3D showing for July 24th. This is the day before. We're checking seats now to see if there are any available. I'm not getting any sold out indications whatsoever. It's taking forever to load the screen. All right, standard, and no tickets have sold. All right, so no tickets have sold. The entire theater is open this is for the 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock on Thursday, July 24th. At my neighborhood theater. Now let's go to Friday. Let's go to Friday. Let's say 6 p.m. Right? You know what? Let's go for 4 p.m. IMAX 3D on Friday, July 25th. How many tickets have sold at that particular theater for 4 p.m. Friday on July 25th for Fantastic Four First Steps? Let's see. The answer is, as I'm checking, none. Now, I want to point out that these theaters that I'm looking at, this is NCG Cinemas, this is not AMC. It's important to note that the ticket servers that crashed were specifically for AMC. AMC is one theater chain, right? We've got AMC, we've got NCG, we've got Imagine, we've got MJR, we've got Regal, right? There's so many different theater chains. We didn't hear about ticket websites being crashed at other theater chains, right? And I'm telling you right now, and that's just for my neighborhood theater, right? If I go and look for listings for my favorite theater, the one that I've been going to a lot lately, right? Let's see if tickets are on sale at the Imagine theater that I've been going to lately. If we go to July 25th, okay, right now on Fandango, I can't buy tickets at the Imagine theater, right, for Fantastic Four right now. I cannot do that. Like not for this site, not through Fandango in that regard, right? So not at the normal Imagine Palladium theater that I go to. Let's see about the actual website. If I go to the Imagine website and I look up Imagine Palladium, let's see, not Thursday, July 24th, Friday, July 25th. Friday, July 25th, if I go to the website, no, I cannot buy tickets yet. This is at my normal theater, my regular theater that I've gone to, that's become my favorite theater, but the theater that I go to watch movies right after work. Like, I can't buy tickets for it yet. I cannot do that, right? And let's see, that's the same for the one in Rochester Hills. It's the same for the one in Novi. And I'm willing to bet, John, that these tickets are not yet available. Okay, Heartland, here we go. If I go to the one in Heartland, which is not close to where I live or where I work, then I can buy tickets for Fantastic Four. I'm pointing this out, John, is to say that it's overblown. It is. It's massively overblown. Yeah, the ticket servers on AMC, like crashed, like on that first day. Okay, whatever. Like, it's a publicity stunt. And then I thought about it and I said, okay, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because think about the position that Marvel Studios purports themselves to be in at this point, right? Or at least the perception of Marvel Studios out there. The narrative out there of Marvel is dying or Marvel is dead. Marvel Studios is in trouble. They can't make $1 billion anymore. That's essentially what you're hearing, right? the pressure is more on them. And again, that is not to say that there is no pressure on James Gunn and Peter Safran for DC Studios and Superman. That's not to say there's no pressure. Of course there is. But it's a different type of pressure. They're just starting over. They are rebooting. In many cases, there are a lot more people rooting for them than there are necessarily rooting for the Fantastic Four. And the reason I say that is because there are people that are Superman fans, and however they feel about the DCEU, they want to see a DC rebound. And they're fearful of the possibility of there not being one, but they really want to support this one, especially if they think that it can bolster their bullshit-ass narratives about how the previous version of Superman wasn't actually Superman and was more like Homelander. That nonsense, right? So the thing is, it's a different perspective in that regard. And so as far as like deciding to release tickets now, for somebody like me that wants to go to the same theater to watch both of these movies, I'm in no different of a position. Only if I live in certain areas and if I go to a certain theater chain, right? So basically I have to go to AMC in order to be certain that I can buy my Fantastic Four tickets. Well, the AMC theaters that I go to, it's not that I'm anti-AMC, but AMC is not my preference. Imagine is my preference. So, I don't know precisely what the business reason is for why Superman tickets are not on sale yet. I read a few days ago that they may go on sale later this week. Let me see if I can Google that. Let's just go ahead and ask Google if I can type properly here. Come on, learn how to type, right? What are we doing here? This is in real time, people, as I'm recording. When do Superman, why can I not type? Good grief. When do, because the mic is in front of my keyboard in that regard. All right. Superman tickets on sale date. According to this Reddit post 3 days ago, June 11th. Now, where's the source for that? I have no idea. Oh, wow, really? I didn't realize that I had been banned from the DC. Oh, no, I have. I have been banned from this DC community. Yeah, because they're a bunch of assholes. Whatever. They didn't like some of the stuff that I was saying that was pro-Snyderverse. Oh, dear. Whatever. But let's see. Looking at, June 11th. So it looks like 1 month, right? So they're waiting for the 1 month date, like 1 month prior to the release. That's their idea. I mean, allegedly, okay? And to be honest with you, that's all you need. You don't necessarily need there to be like so far ahead. One question one could ask is, why are Fantastic Four First Steps tickets being sold that early? And again, I think that goes into, the way that the Marvel Studios operates and the hype that they're trying to build beforehand. And it's not that DC Studios isn't building or isn't trying to build hype behind Superman. They most certainly are. They're doing it other ways, more than just having ticket pre-sales. They're doing it in the sense of like the Fortnite crossover ads that a couple of people sent me earlier this week. I think Julian Barrios sent me that not too long ago, and a few others have tagged me in that as well, right? Like the Fortnite crossovers, the crossovers I brought up with respect to the NBA, the behind-the-scenes marketing and clips and whatnot, which, all that stuff, the character posters, right? So, the marketing push is there. The marketing presence is absolutely there. There's no question about it. But, yeah, it's just a different tack. That's all it is. I don't think it's that big of a deal at the end of the day. Like, I thought about it initially, and then when I did some further research, I was like, well, it's really just for AMC chains. If I can't, go to a certain location, like I said, only if I decide to go to Heartland can I buy tickets right now for Fantastic Four, right? To go see it early. And I don't need to buy my tickets this early. Clearly, because even at the theaters, like the NCG cinemas that I looked up in my neighborhood, tickets still haven't sold. Like, no one has bought those theaters, right? Like, no, not one ticket for Fantastic Four is sold. And there will be tickets sold, but I'm not in a hurry. This is not like The Force Awakens, okay? This is not like The Force Awakens. I had 24 hours. I had 24 hours, and I had less than 24 hours. The second those tickets went on sale online, I had to hurry just so that we could get a noon showing the day after, right? Friday tickets sold really quickly for that one, like lightning fast, within like an hour or so. Like, that's a bigger story, right? Like, that's across the board, and that was, again, not AMC. That was a different theater chain. So that's what I feel like Marvel is trying to do. Did it necessarily happen? No, it doesn't look like it did. But either way, it's just another hype move in that regard. But I don't think Superman is hurting because their tickets are going to go on sale a week or so after Fantastic Four. I don't think that's it at all. I think it really just comes down to that marketing, and we'll see how effective the marketing certainly is. All right. Another email here from John R., a serious question and a not so serious question. He says, starting with the serious question first, with Marvel, the lowest grossing film of Phase 1 was The Incredible Hulk, $262 million. Was it 262? I thought it was lower than that, but either way. He says Phase 2 was Ant-Man with $520 million. I feel like that was higher too, but he says Phase 3 was Ant-Man and the Wasp with $620 million. Obviously, the pandemic skewed the narrative for what constitutes success. So when Black Widow made $380 million and premiere access on Disney Plus, that was technically the lowest of Phase 4, but I think Eternals earned the least amount overall, he says. Phase 5 had the lowest grossing film with the Marvels at $206 million, which I believe was one of maybe even solely Disney's biggest financial loss in studio's history. I think that's a bold statement, but all right. He says the lowest growing DCEU films are Blue Beetle and Shazam, Fury of the Gods, with $130 million. In the post-COVID world, he says the MCU since 2021 have averaged around $717 million. The average for the Infinity Saga was $978 million, so the MCU's average is down by $270 million. The DCEU, he says, averaged $820 million with the first 6 films, but post-COVID their average dropped significantly to $250 million. He says, I think a fair average for the MCU to get back to its former glory, I think goal for them, beginning with Doomsday, should be $850 million for their films, which is the middle number between 717 and 978. For the DCU, since it is a spiritual successor to the DCEU for the first half of Chapter 1, should be $534 million, which is the middle of $248 million and $820 million, and by the second half of the chapter, getting as close to that $820 million average as possible would benefit the DCU. I'm not including other cinematic universes like the Spider-Verse because that's not really an applicable comparison. What do you think is a fair benchmark needed in order for either of these two franchises to earn and or maintain their status as a success? The correct answer to this, objectively, John, is whatever Marvel Studios and DC Studios considers to be success. And that is not an answer that you or I or anybody else has. All the rest of us are doing is guessing. 1,000% guessing. Because here's the deal. It comes down to their profit loss margin. Whatever is going on with Disney, whatever is going on with Warner Brothers Discovery, it is the cards are in their court, right? The ball is in their court, right? They're holding the cards. They're the ones making the decisions. And it's up to them to determine what they think is a success and what is a failure, not us. It's not up to us. Like we can, go and see the movie. We can go and support it, do whatever, right? That's one thing, right? But as far as at the end of the day, what they think is a success or not, that's their choice. It's their decision. So to me, all these numbers that you're quoting, which, I swear that all the numbers you're quoting have been reported differently by other sites, right? I don't know what site you use, but I know that there's a disparity between what Box Office Mojo reports and what the Numbers.com reports, and there could be a disparity between either of those sites and what Forbes reports or what Google does in a search. We can get 4 or 5 different numbers with respect to how much any of these movies made, and I think that's part of the issue, is that all the rest of us are guessing and kind of like trying to, we're going off of what is being reported by different outlets, whether it's Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, whoever it is, right? But there's so much ambiguity and there's so much guesswork. Here's what I will say. If you're asking me to make a fan guess, it's very simple. Doomsday is going to make $1 billion. And the reason I say that is because it has been proven, historically speaking, the track record of Marvel Studios, their team-ups are what make money, right? Regardless of what the solo films do. And that's where I think the perception really kind of got out of hand, was Marvel had so many movies making $1 billion, and they included solo films in that as well, right? Like Iron Man 3, like Black Panther, like Captain Marvel, right? Those are solo films that made Marvel $1 billion, right? But all of their Avengers films have made at least $1 billion, right? Spider-Man No Way Home, massive team up, made $1 billion. Deadpool and Wolverine team up, made $1 billion, $1.5 billion or whatever it was, right? And so Avengers probably will. Avengers, Doomsday, and probably also Secret Wars will make at least $1 billion. I think that is what would certainly be the $1 billion mark. I think perceptually would be considered a success. With Superman, I know that there are going to be people out there, they're going to say, oh, it's got to make $1 billion or else it's not a success. The reality of the situation, and I hate that this is the case, I don't like it at all, but let's be real here. You know that all that movie really needs to make for it to be perceived as a success by the gatekeepers and by all the people that embrace scoreboard mentality is if it makes more money than Man of Steel. Because they want to be able to say that it outgrossed Man of Steel. They want to be able to say that it out-earned Man of Steel. They want to be able to say that James Gunn is better than Zack Snyder. And this is also why I don't feel there is a fair benchmark in terms of, like not an objective one. There is no objective data point. The only objective data point that we have is what Warner Brothers Discovery or Disney feels is the data point for them to proceed as far as success. That's the only objective data point that exists. The rest of us, it's all based on subjective feeling and subjective perception. Because again, if Superman makes $750 million, right, which means it's short of $1 billion, but if it makes $750 million, then somewhere the headline is going to go, and we're going to see this headline. Superman outgrosses Man of Steel. We're going to see that. It's going to happen. And that alone will allow people in whatever world they live in to consider it a success, even though it will not have hit that mythical $1 billion benchmark, right? Because $1 billion has never been an actual logistical benchmark for any studio. That just is not realistic in that regard, right? But that's all it needs with respect to that. That's what I would say. And perhaps that's what it will earn. Listen, I want Superman to do $1 billion. I do. I want it to earn. I want it to succeed because I want the DCU to succeed. This is their fledgling outing. This is their first film, first theatrical component. You know, and you want it to get off to a good start, like we've talked about with respect to that. So this is a case where, you know, not that the brand of DC, right? I'm not extending this to the brand of DC because miss me with all this DC brand has been damaged nonsense. No, it's not that at all. Because if Superman fails, then Warner Brothers will just give us another decade of Batman movies. And those don't fail, right? Batman movies do not fail. So, you know, perhaps there are people out there that, you know, are impatient for the Batman Part 2. Perhaps they're rooting for Superman's demise because then that means the Batman Epic Crime Saga will continue forward and they'll fast track it. That's not necessarily what it will mean, but it will mean that, you know, they'll go back to whatever it is that they know makes them money, right? And DC Comics makes Warner Brothers money, just like Marvel Comics makes Disney money in that regard, right? So I don't think there's an objective answer to this question. I really don't. At least not one for us. There's one that the studios had that we don't have. But I would say that Avengers is going to make $1 billion. Avengers has to make $1 billion for the perception of success, right? And that's all it is. Not whether it is an actual success or not on the ledger for Disney, but the perception of success. Avengers has got to hit at least $1 billion. And Superman's got to hit 750. It's got to outgross Man of Steel because Man of Steel made 668. If I'm not mistaken, in that regard. And that number, I'm sure, has been reported differently in other places. So, yeah, that's what I would say to that serious question, if you will. Now, what was your not-so-serious question? What are the odds we hear the Beach Boys song Surfer Girl in Fantastic Four First Steps, since there is an actual surfer girl in it, or woman? I don't want to be misogynist. I don't think... Is that really misogynist? To say girl over... I don't know about that. But either way, I don't know. I don't know what the odds are. Entirely possible. Here, I tell you what. How about this? What year? I'm gonna try Googling again. Okay, let's move the keyboard out of the way of the mic so I can see it. When did learn how to type? When did Surfer Girl come out? Surfer Girl. Dang it. Okay, that didn't help. All right, Surfer Girl, Beach Boys. Okay, let's see. No, not the lyrics. When did wow, this is ridiculous. Surfer Girl, Beach Boys. Can we get a date? Is there a date that this was released? Let's see. I know you know what the date is. Here we go. September 16th, 1963. Okay, I think that increases your odds, John. Here's why. Because it's a retro future film, right? And there's definitely a 60s retro future aesthetic to this film that we're seeing, right? So, higher possibility, right? I don't know for certain, but I think solid odds. I'll give you solid odds that you could hear that based on the time period that it was released and the time period, you know, the retro future that we're seeing that this film is going to take place in. Yes. Solid odds of that, I'd say, John. All right. So this, believe it or not, because of the amount of emails you said, and it's funny you said you were going to send a lot. You did send quite a few, actually. But we'll get to this last one, John, because this is turned into a Dorsey length segment, hilariously enough. But this last one is just a screenshot. And what it is just a screenshot of Kevin Smith's statement on James Gunn's Superman, which I did read this. I did hear about this. So I will go ahead and read this, and you know, we'll talk about it here for a bit. But Kevin Smith on James Gunn's Superman said, quote, "It feels more comic booky is what it is. I mean, number one, putting his trunks on the outside again is just charming. And including the dog is not something we've seen over the course of the last 10 years. And I think that's such a smart choice, man. Unless they hurt that effing dog, which then can also be a strong choice, dramatically speaking, but it just looks so charming. Superman is ascendant whenever the country is doing poorly or it needs help, and that's when that character plays strongest. So it would feel like, based on that, like Superman, the stage is set for the movie to make so much effing money. People want hope right now. People just want to believe in an effing thing, man. 100% nailed it, the person, whoever posted this on Facebook. Okay. And I don't know who the Facebook account is that posted this, but all right. So, I mean, first of all, Kevin Smith's statement, I mean, there's nothing, like, I don't think there's anything inflammatory about anything that he's saying here. It does, at least from the appearance of what we're seeing in these trailers, it does feel more comic booky. It does. Because one of the things that, I talked about with the Zack Snyder aesthetic in the DCEU is that it's like a grounded, grittier, realistic version of a comic book aesthetic, right? Like, they're still trying to put it in the real world, but a real world that exists within the comic book aesthetic. This looks like it's going to be comic book aesthetic. This looks like a world that's going to, potentially jump off the page in that regard, in terms of the colors, in terms of the, not just the brightness, but just the aesthetic and the tone that we are seeing. This looks like this may be more ripped from the comics in that regard. And so I hear him on that, definitely the classic look with the trunks, those of us, whether we're pro trunks or anti trunks, where I sit on that, with respect to that. And Crypto, I mean, he says that including the dog, isn't something we've seen over the course of the last 10 years. We've never seen it theatrically. Crypto was not a part of the Christopher Reeve films whatsoever. He certainly wasn't in Superman Returns, and he wasn't in the Zack Snyder films either. This is the first time that a cinematic Superman has involved Crypto, by far. It's not the first time he's had dogs, right? As far as, like, in live action, right? We can go to some of the TV shows and whatnot for that. I don't know that they've been Crypto, but this is the first time we're seeing Crypto cinematically in live action in the 47 years that Superman has been, on the big screen, right? So, and I agree with him that is, a smart choice, right? One of the cross promotions I really dug is the Milkbone promotions, right? Seeing Crypto on a Milkbone box, right? Dog lovers and dog owners are going to see that movie for that reason. And he's right. You don't do anything to the dog. Don't hurt the dog. Protect the dog. But I feel like James Gunn knows this, because he's basing the dog on his own actual dog, Ozu, and he's a dog lover and a cat lover. Like, he's got dogs and cats. He posts all about them all the time on social media when he's not in the middle of doing PR for Superman. He posts about them all the time on Threads and on Twitter and wherever else he's at, right? So I think I agree with it as far as it being a strong choice. And it does, there are parts of it that absolutely look charming. And yes, I do think that there is a component to what he's talking about in the second paragraph, where he talks about how he's ascendant whenever the country is doing poorly or it needs help. That's when the character plays the strongest. Yeah, that absolutely could. There could be an audience, especially when we're talking about the vulnerability of Superman. And if we get into what actually is going on in terms of, like, him standing for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, and his actions being judged by the government, right? We're at a point in history, we're at a point in time, especially in the United States, where mistrust and distrust of the United States government and all of our institutions are at an all-time high. Skepticism has never been higher than this. I think even higher than Civil War days in this regard, right? And so the idea of wanting some goodness, wanting a character that exudes hope, wanting to believe in something like that. No, I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. Now, how much that translates, how much that means people buy tickets and go to the theater to see it, I don't know. We're going to find out in a little over a month, right? We are almost exactly a month away. Me recording the day this episode is June 8th. We're 3 days away from 1 month away. We will find out. We will absolutely find out on July 11th and going forward how many people, translate that feeling and wanting to hope into buying tickets and going to see that film. We will see. And I hope it does. I really do. I hope that it does become a symbol, in these very trying times for a lot of us, for all of us, really, that, people do look to Superman as a source of hope and as a symbol of hope. I do hope that is the case, right? But I agree with just about everything that Kevin Smith says here. I disagree with none of it, truthfully. I don't think that there's anything wrong with what he said. I think he makes some very solid points, some very valid points. And so we'll see. We will see how all that plays out, and fingers crossed with respect to success, hopeful success for Superman. But there you have it. All right, so thus ends John R.'s Dorsey-sized, let's see how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 emails that he sent this week. He said he wasn't going to send a lot, but he said 7 emails. But some good stuff in there, some good stuff to talk about. As always, John R., thank you so much for your contributions and for your what-if scenarios and for posing some intriguing questions with respect to, movies, TV, and other sort of media. So thank you, as always, good sir. So that was a Dorsey-length series of emails. Now let's get to an actual Dorsey email. Anthony Dorsey rejoining the feedback circle this week with an email missive sent via Digital Raven titled Flightbox number 2 or Flight Chat 2.0 number 1. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. Oh boy. Well, here we go. He is coming right. He's coming hot off the presses with respect to that. All right, Anthony, what have you got to say this week? He says, hello there. I'm back again with some watch updates after another long gap as I was waiting for certain TV seasons to end to discuss the whole thing rather than do partial season reviews. Besides TV, look forward to some reading, video game, and movie updates in this email and probably a 30 to 70 minute break from the hellscape that is reality. 70 minutes? He's timing this out to be 70 minutes potentially? Really? An hour and 10 minutes? Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. He says, before all that, I've got some past email follow-ups. Listening to your reading of my last emails, I wanted to clarify a couple of things. He says, first of all, I did not mean to say I rank Brave New World higher than Black Widow. It's actually several places down on my ranking compared to Black Widow. I meant to say that it felt like Brave New World was more of a discount version of Winter Soldier than Black Widow. If Winter Soldier is the name brand, then Widow is the Costco brand, and Brave New World is the Walmart brand. Okay, you know what? I could buy that. Especially since between those, yeah, I could say, okay, so Winter Soldier is the name brand, Widow is Kirkland, and Brave New World is, not Members Mark, but Mainstays, right? Isn't it Mainstays? I think so. I think that's the Walmart brand. Okay, I'll buy that. I would totally buy that because I did like all 3 of those films. And by the way, my Brave New World Glorious Steelbook did come in, a week or so ago when it finally released. So I've got all of them. I have Winter Soldier, I have Black Widow, and I have Brave New World. I'll go with that. That's a good progression. I do like that. He says, also, I forgot to mention that the return of Daredevil prompted me to rewatch the original 3 seasons, which I did concurrently with Born Again. Yes, I've read a good amount of Daredevil, but my love of the character stems from this show, and I herald it as one of my top shows of all time, with Season 3 being one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen. So for me, this does explain why I made so many comparisons in my Born Again review, and why it seemed like I was so critical. I think Born Again Season 1 ended up being fantastic, especially considering the creative overhaul, but no, I wouldn't say it was one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen. That doesn't make it bad, though. It's just an A tier and not an S tier. Yeah, I did not realize that necessarily that you held Daredevil in that high regard. I would not put that season that high. I mean, it was an excellent season and arguably the best season of that series, but one of the best seasons of television of all time. Me personally, I would not put that as an all-timer in my list, but I'd have to think about that further with respect to television seasons in general and what I think is all time in that regard. But off the top of my head, I would not agree with that. So yeah, that I can understand where your perspective is coming from with respect to Born Again on that one. He says also, while Spider-Man doesn't appear all the time in Daredevil stories, he was heavily involved in the Mayor Fisk arc and during the Chip Zdarsky run and the Devil's Reign event, which this show takes a lot of inspiration from, featured him and the Defenders, with Luke Cage taking a big role as he ends up running against Fisk for mayor. None of this means these characters need to appear in the show, but it is part of why so many people want to see them show up. Okay, that's fine, but like you said, they don't have to. And you know how it goes with fans, Anthony. Like, there's a fine line between they don't have to show up and we demand they show up. And I saw a lot of the latter, I should say, is a lot of people like not happy, like unhappy, like disappointed that they didn't see Luke Cage, that they didn't see Jessica Jones. And it's like, come on, just can we, asking fans to put things into perspective, that's such a tall order. It's like asking for patience, but it is what it is. So, all right. He says, now for my various reviews that I hope at least somebody looks forward to in these missives. All right. He starts with Star Wars The High Republic Phase 2 Summarize. He says, I cannot recall how much I've discussed the High Republic in past emails besides its small connections in the Acolyte, but regardless of Phase 1, in classic Star Wars fashion, Phase 2 of this publishing initiative takes place sometime before Phase 1. I'm not going to dive into many specifics, he says, because I'm talking about 4 novels, a comic series, and more, so there's no time for all of that. To start the phase, Path of Deceit lays the groundwork for what's to come through an incredibly compelling story following a force cult calling themselves the Path of the Open Hand, led by a mysterious figure called the Mother. The Path believes that when the Jedi use the Force, they cause a butterfly effect, where even if they save someone while using the Force, something terrible will happen elsewhere in the galaxy. Characters of note include Marta Rowe, a zealous member of the cult, her cousin Yana Rowe, a thief tasked with liberating Force artifacts from the unworthy, Kevmo Zink, a Jedi Padawan who travels to the Path's home with his master to recover stolen artifacts, but ends up starting a relationship with Marta. This novel is one of the best Star Wars novels I've read regardless of the rest of the High Republic, he says. It ends up being very tragic and surprising with stunning revelations that remind the readers of Phase 1 that this was always a villain origin story. Okay. The next 2 novels, he says, Convergence and Cataclysm, follow the Jedi and Republic politicians attempting to bring about peace between 2 warring twin planets, Irona and Iram, I hope I pronounced those right. First through bringing together their heirs for a wedding of convenience, and later through uncovering a secret meddling third party, the aforementioned Path of the Open Hand. Important characters in these novels include the dual Chancellors of the Republic, Kaong Greylark, a very regal Michelio type, and Malo, a much more jovial and adventurous Quarren, Axel Greylark, son of the Chancellor and a general nuisance who tells more lies than truths, Gela Natai, a solitary Jedi Knight who forms a contentious relationship with Axel while trying to discover her path as a Jedi, Ziri Iberon, or Alberon, princess and captain of Erono's army who will do whatever it takes to drive her people to space, and Fantu Zen, adopted heir of Iram's queen, who falls for Ziri first but is not the one to introduce the idea of marriage. These novels work great on their own, telling a great standalone story of the quest for peace between 2 worlds, while also furthering the story of the Path of the Open Hand and the Jedi through a massive battle sequence at the end, as well as much intrigue leading to that dramatic final act. In the middle of those books, he says, an audio drama and the accompanying comic series is The Battle of Jeddah, which features the Path playing a big hand in failing peace talks between Iram and Arona and rising tensions on the pilgrim moon of Jeddah, eventually explaining the fall of the giant Jedi statue seen in Rogue One. These events lead to the final book, Path of Vengeance, which culminates the story of the Path and shows their perspective on the climactic events of the phase, since the first novel leading to a satisfying, surprising, and intense ending to the Path, and sets up very well the events of the rest of the High Republic initiative, showing the origins of the Nihil and their leader, Marchion Ro, as well as his terrifying creatures known simply as the Nameless, which can drain the Force from any Force sensitives and turn them to ash. Loved Phase 2, and I'm looking forward to getting caught up on Phase 3 soon. That's a lot of reading. I mean, not a bad thing, but that is a lot of reading. All right. High marks for Phase 2 of this Star Wars literary initiative. Now on to a video game review from Anthony. This is Detroit Become Human. He says it's got light spoilers. I have not played this game, but I am familiar with it, or I'm aware of it, I should say. A PS4 original, also available on Windows, from Quantic Dream. Detroit is a branching narrative game similar to Telltale's style, but with movie-quality graphics, cinematography, and motion capture. This game takes place in a cyberpunk near-future Detroit where AI androids have become commonplace in both work and home, fulfilling any task needed by humans. As expected, he says, androids turning against their owner becomes a growing problem daily. The player controls 3 androids. The first is Kara, Valerie Curry, a maid android who escapes a toxic owner, saving the daughter Alice, Audrey Bustani, whom he abused and eventually becomes a mother figure herself. Another is Marcus, Jesse Williams, a caretaker for an elderly man, Lance Henriksen, who gets involved in a family dispute leading to him getting shot and thrown in a dump, which sets him on a journey to become a revolutionary for android rights. The final character and most popular is Connor, Brian Deckhart, an android detective sent by the company CyberLife to investigate deviancy with the help of his android-hating partner Hank, Clancy Brown. Okay, so that's like an Alienation type situation, all right. Other cast members include Dominic Gould, Neil Newbon, and Minka Kelly. This game stands out among other branching narrative games to me, he says, due to being able to view the flowchart of your decisions after each chapter, giving you an idea of how things might have played out had you made different choices without giving away what those decisions would have led to. It takes about 12 hours to get a full playthrough, but I was able to get all trophies in the game in a bit over 30 hours over the course of about 2.5 playthroughs plus several chapter replays. The choices you make throughout the game can drastically or slightly change your overall experience, leading to at least 6 different final missions, at least 2 per character, with even more endings. It is very possible to kill off your main and side characters, and when someone is gone, then they're gone, and the story adjusts. All 3 characters have very compelling arcs if played out to completion, with Kara's being the most emotional journey. Connor being an iRobot meets buddy cop action film, and Marcus having the plot-moving peaceful or violent revolution epic that decides the fate of Detroit. If I have any complaints, he says, it is that Kara's story felt very disconnected from the other stories, and her convergence with Marcus felt very forced, and it is very difficult to get her to converge with Connor in any scenario besides one chase scene and another brief meeting if you engineer certain events. Also, after going through several endings, I wish there was a bit more of an epilogue for certain endings which set up interesting follow-ups that will never happen except in our imagination. Overall, great game despite the studio that made it being a bit problematic. Rating 8.5 out of 10. I don't know anything about Quantic Dream's problematic history, but I will take your word for it because it wouldn't surprise me these days. Like I said, I've heard of this game. Obviously, have not played it because we're still primarily an Xbox household. I believe we have a PS4, but yeah, just have not really delved into that. I'm trying to remember what was the other game. There was a game. Heavy Rain. That's right. Yes, Heavy Rain was a game that I didn't beat, but it was a game that I did buy and play for the PS3. That was like that was an earlier Quantic Dream title that was like crazy in its own right in a number of ways, and a lot of the stuff that was described here in this particular like description for Detroit Become Human sounds like a lot of the stuff that was like kind of in earnest set up like ideas and whatnot in as far as story progression in Heavy Rain and so forth. And I know they also did Beyond Two Souls, so yeah. All right. It's a rousing review. 8.5 out of 10 he gave it, Anthony did, for Detroit Become Human. All right. So on to Tales of the Underworld. Now this is Disney Plus animated Star Wars. Light spoilers for the show, but big spoiler for a book, okay? He says, after the disappointing Tales of the Empire, my hype for this short anthology series was lessened, but of course, I still went in with an open mind. While I don't think this was the best one yet, he says, it was a big improvement over Empire. In Tales of the Empire, we had a long-anticipated follow-up for Barriss Offee and a decently interesting backstory for Morgan Elsbeth. This time we see a continuation of Asajj Ventress' story following her death and resurrection, which all formed a solid short film that could very well be a backdoor pilot for a full show. In case you don't know, Ventress had a full canon novel, Dark Disciple, based on unproduced Clone Wars episodes back when the show was canceled, showing her falling in love with Jedi Knight Quinlan Vos and leading to her redemption and death. This show keeps that canon and picks up right where the book ends, then jumps to after her appearance in The Bad Batch. I enjoyed her story here, but I do hope they have big plans for the character now that they brought her back from the dead beyond just these shorts. I wouldn't have minded if they spent some more time recapping the Dark Disciple novel for those who haven't read it, as the intro is very confusing for non-readers. But I ended up really enjoying Ventress' arc here alongside her new sidekick. He also says the other set of shorts from the Tales of the Underworld follows gunslinger Cad Bane and finally reveals his backstory. As a fan of the character, I was long interested in learning more about him, and I was very satisfied seeing it play out here in a very Western movie fashion, with much inspiration taken from High Noon and other Westerns. Like previous Tales of arcs, besides Ventress, he says, this arc takes place over 3 time periods in Bane's life, leading him to become the ruthless bounty hunter we know from the Clone Wars and onwards, demonstrating that he had ruthlessness in him from the start, rather than any sort of fall from grace that you'd find often in villain origins. Both of these arcs were great stories that didn't disappoint at all, he says. It's hard to rate this as both stories are so different, but I will rank all 6 character arcs from the Tales of series starting at the top. Dooku, Cad Bane, Ahsoka Tano, Asajj Ventress, Morgan Elsbeth, Barriss Offee. When I watch them, I can provide some opinions, but I have not watched any of the Tales series, so they're on the list. We'll get to that. Should I watch those before or after my Doctor Who catch-up, Anthony? What are your thoughts on that one? Next up, Anthony's got a couple of movie reviews, starting with The Accountant 2. No spoilers. Good, because I haven't even seen the first one. He says, after a long wait since 2016, this sequel has finally been released and honestly surpassed the original for me, he says. The first one was quite slower and had a frankly odd romance, but this one builds on the established relationship of the two brothers, Batman and the Punisher, which wasn't explored heavily in the original and just shows how much chemistry these two have with each other. Time out. before anybody who's actually listening to this that hasn't seen The Accountant does know what he meant when he said Batman and the Punisher, it's Ben Affleck and Jon Bernthal, just for anybody that doesn't know. But anyway, he says, I could watch a whole movie of them just hanging out, didn't even need the action scenes. I was happy to have them, though, even especially the final set piece. All in all, a great action flick. If you haven't seen the original in a while or at all, it's worth a watch or a rewatch before seeing this, and I hope this did well enough to justify a third movie. 9 out of 10. Well, here, let's do some fan guesswork here. Because I think for a lot of us, Sinners like overshadowed like The Accountant when it released in that regard, at least for a lot of us. But let's see, 101.9 million worldwide. But the budget for this movie couldn't have been that big, right? Couldn't have. I mean, it's not showing, and I hate that Box Office Mojo doesn't show budgets. But here, let's see, budget for the Learn How to Type, Ray. What the hell? Budget for Accountant 2. Let's see, reportedly $80 million. Okay, well, I mean, either way, like, it didn't hit its, mythical break-even number, and I call it mythical break-even number because, whatever, I don't buy any of the metrics in terms of break-even point, because, again, it's up to the studios as far as what they want to do with it or not. But I guess it was supposed to break even at 160, right? That's the mythical break-even point. Like, double the production budget? Okay, whatever. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It feels like it's in the gray area with respect to that, because $80 million isn't a ton. It's not a ton of money to, like, necessarily spend on a budget for this, so it really just depends on what they want to do and how they feel like maybe home sales or something could actually like help it out with respect to that. So I mean, we'll see how it goes as far as whether it's justified in making a third one, but I'd still need to go back and see the first one before even thinking about seeing the second one in that regard. But 9 out of 10 from Anthony on The Accountant. All right, now let's get to his thoughts on Thunderbolts, which will include spoilers, which fair game because, of course, he knows that I've seen it and I have reviewed it, and it's been fair game for the last month or so since it is released. So here we go. He says, in the absolute gluttony of MCU content recently, I'm very happy to see one that I think will stand the test of time to be one of the franchise's greats. This team of misfit secret agents turned new Avengers really blew me away, and I've since seen it 3 times in the movie theater. My one criticism is the common complaint that killing Taskmaster so quickly was a complete waste of a character. Her death doesn't add much to the story or anyone else's development, though I can see why they wanted her to be an example of where that spy life will lead. Unlike Brave New World, which I felt had very obvious reshoots, I didn't notice anything like that here, though I suspect they had different plans for Taskmaster before the overall plan changed to making this team the new Avengers. I would have also liked a shame room sequence for Ava, he says, since her only other appearance was in a very forgettable movie 7 years ago, but even without that, I enjoyed her character throughout, and the team dynamic was so good that I didn't even think of that until the movie was over. Walker was a great asshole of a character, just like in Falcon and Winter Soldier, he says. Ava was a fun supporting character, and Alexei was still his silly self, but at the same time, he often had the most genuine and emotional moments in the film. Bob was a strong new character that could be relatable to many, but should at least be empathetic enough to carry the main plot of the film, and of course, Yelena is the true lead of the film and quickly went from a fun side character in Black Widow and Hawkeye to one of the best protagonists in the MCU. Seeing Yelena at her lowest point like this was very touching, as she doesn't suddenly solve her depression at the end by becoming an Avenger or something else. Seeing this reluctant team with their unique issues come together to pull Bob out of his void was one of the top scenes in the series, and it will stick with me for a long time. I'm sad to see this movie bomb, but I feel this puts the nail in the coffin of the general audience not wanting to see the movies that have TV shows as homework. Rating 9 out of 10, ranked 8th in my full MCU ranking. All right. Few things to say about that. First, I don't agree with the last sentence, which is, I feel this puts the nail in the coffin of the general audience not wanting to see the movies that have TV shows as homework. As I've said before, and I will remain steadfast on this, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that matters. And I really do think that we are over-glorifying the homework problem. I really do. And I know that you run into somebody that says, how many Marvel movies have they made? Well, that person that is asking that question is not somebody that's probably going to be that interested in seeing or watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the first place, right? But other people that have a passing fancy for it will watch whatever they are entertained by and don't necessarily care about the homework problem. I maintain that the primary issue is how many movies Marvel is releasing a year. If there had been no Captain America Brave New World and Thunderbolts was the first Marvel film of the year in May, I think it does better. I absolutely think it does better, like financially speaking, especially the way that it was rated. I really believe that is the case. in that regard. And I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that, Yelena comes from Black Widow and Hawkeye, or John Walker comes from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or that Ghost, because she didn't say her name, her actual code name, Ghost. Ava is Ghost, right? From Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? Not Quantumania, but Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I will definitely also take issue in terms of the such a forgettable movie. Listen, is Ant-Man and the Wasp like in my top tier? No. Let's see. Let me crack open my list again. Where do I have it? Well, hilariously, I have it 28th, which the reason it's hilarious, Anthony, is because it's one spot ahead of where I have Avengers Age of Ultron, which we all know is your favorite Avengers movie of all time. I can hear his skin crawling as I say that. But my point is that, as much as Ant-Man and the Wasp wasn't, high tier or maybe even mid-tier MCU for me, her presence, and maybe this is just because I'm a Hannah John Kamen fan. I feel like people that know her and have seen her from like Killjoys and Brave New World and other stuff. And when I say Brave New World, I'm not talking about Captain America Brave New World. I'm talking about the show Brave New World that was based off of the Aldous Huxley novel of the same name that was on Peacock for a season. She was awesome in that, and she's been awesome in other things as well. I feel like people that know her dig that character, and she was notable as that character in that film, right? And her presence definitely did add to the team dynamic in this movie. And I'm okay that she didn't get a shame room sequence because, again, go back and watch Ant-Man and the Wasp and you'll see that, right? I feel like we saw stuff with John Walker that we didn't see necessarily, like, beforehand, in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier in his shame room, and also the same with Yelena as well, like, because there's not a whole, like, Yelena's backstory, she shared it with Natasha in Black Widow, and then she never got a chance on her own to, like, have her own backstory. I mean, we saw bits and pieces of stuff that she went through in Hawkeye, right? But nothing huge in that regard. So this was an opportunity for her to shine in that regard. And like you said, you didn't think of it until after the movie was over, but yeah, that's your one, like, thing that you're, one of the things that you have a caveat with. And the Taskmaster thing, it's like, again, I really just feel like they just didn't want to do anything with that character. And, is Black Widow any less or more forgettable than Ant-Man and the Wasp? Well, on my list, Black Widow is 22. So Black Widow is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots ahead of Ant-Man and the Wasp. As far as this particular, is that right? Hang on, 21, 22, 23, 24, yeah, that is right. Okay, so 1, 2, no, 5, yeah, 5 movies. Wait, no, that numbering, why does that look off? That numbering looks off for some reason, but it is not. Okay, no, it isn't. I get it. My math is good. I'm overthinking this. But at any rate, yeah. So to me, I don't think any of those detractions are major. It doesn't sound like you're saying that either, but yeah. I don't think the homework problem had anything to do with why this movie performed the way they did at the box office. I really don't. I put more of it on the fact that there are 3 Marvel movies. I think the general audience is waiting for Fantastic Four First Steps because that's the Marvel movie that they've chosen this year that they're going to shell out the money and go see, truthfully. And I think that the homework problem was overblown because they're going to see whatever they see and, whatever they enjoy, and they don't really care that much about connection, not the same way that we do. And again, I know that that's difficult for us to parse in our circles, but that is just how I think the general audience vastly operates in that regard. Remember, the same people who are still waiting for the crossover between the Justice League and the Avengers and believe that members of either group are part of the other. So just throwing that out there. But either way, and you have it 8th in your full MCU ranking. You have Thunderbolts 8th in your ranking. My full ranking still has them at 6. Yes, it's 6. And again, patreon.com/theflightcast does have the episode of Flight Chat where I do detail the entirety of my list, minus Thunderbolts. I mean, I added Thunderbolts later, but if you want to hear the rankings and my explanation for where each of them are ranked, that is totally there, rather detailed. It's only about an hour, so if you are so inclined in that regard. But continuing on, next review that Anthony has is a show. We've got a couple of shows here, actually. The Studio Season 1. Light spoilers. Okay, good, because I'm going to watch this one. And I know it's on my long list of Apple TV Plus watching, but he says, another killer show from Apple, The Studio, follows Seth Rogen as the new head of a fictional film studio and his crew as he attempts to single-handedly save film. This show displays a perfect understanding of both the current state of the film industry and of filmmaking itself. Some episodes build on classic film techniques like The Oneer, play on genres such as detective episodes about finding a missing film reel, or discuss the state of streaming and films through a recreation of the Golden Globes. This show is filled with big cameos, including our guy Zack Snyder, who presents an award at the aforementioned Golden Globes while making a very well-intentioned Snyder Cut joke, which I enjoyed. I've seen the joke. Yes, it's funny. Without spoiling it, the final scene of the season, he says, will stick with me anytime I'm watching a good movie, such as a certain impossible movie I discuss in the next email missive, now in the same way as those Scorsese, who also cameos here, memes of absolute cinema. Rating 9 out of 10. All right. Heard really good things about the studio. It's on the list. All right, now let's get to a show that I've definitely watched, Andor Season 2. Spoilers. Yes, full spoilers. It's been a few weeks now. Simply put, he says, I think this is the best thing to ever come out of Star Wars as a franchise. Part of that is because of how much it enhances the rest of the franchise, building on what the movie set up to tell a perfect lead-in to Rogue One, which now makes it an even better lead-in to the original trilogy. I'm not going to summarize the whole show here. No, you're not. But I want to give my thoughts on each arc, he says. Yes, 4 arcs, so here we go. Arc 1. Loved the intro with Cassian stealing the TIE Avenger, and the speech he gives to the rebel spy made for a perfect start to this season. I didn't love the arc with Cassian stuck on Yavin 4 with those idiots, but I did appreciate how it represented a contrast of leftist infighting at the same time the fascists have a civil conference planning horrible atrocities to gain resources. Yeah, that was one of the early instances of, hitting close to home. Hitting really, really close to home and reality with respect to this show. And that was just the beginning. It says, or he says rather, the wedding was incredibly compelling with stellar costumes and sets, but also a ton of political intrigue leading to Luthen having sent to kill Mon's childhood friend, Takolma, yes. I also very much appreciate the bravery to portray a near rape in a Star Wars show and call it as such. The complaining about this happening is clearly just from men who want to ignore that sexual assault happens even in a fascist galaxy far, far away. And while I love Anakin Vader as a character, to say he wouldn't condone it is both insane and totally beside the point. Also greatly enjoyed Cyril and Dedra's dinner with his mom. Lastly, R.I.P. my man Brasso. He didn't even get to beat anyone else with a brick this season. Yeah. That was one of the one things where I almost wish that I'd done a rewatch of season 1 of Andor, like I could find time to do that. Because the Brasso, character connection, I remembered him, but I didn't have quite the same emotional attachment to him that a lot of people did with respect to him dying in this arc. The dinner with Cyril and Dedra was, hilarious in a number of ways. Especially, my favorite part is when he just was laying on the bed, and Kyle Soller, they actually asked him about that, and he said he did just it was just his natural move. He came up with how he was laying on the bed when that was happening. Just kind of the defeated pose in that regard. But on to arc 2, Anthony says, Cassian took more of a back seat this arc, but I love seeing his relationship with Bix in greater detail, as well as her dealing with her trauma, and it was greatly satisfying to see her blow up her torturer, especially seeing as he had almost no idea who she was, just showing how much of a monster he was. The beginning of the Gorman arc was interesting, leading to a near-successful mission, but came at the cost of Cinta's life due to incompetence, and Vel's speech to her killer was brutal. I'm happy they at least explicitly showed this couple as a couple before the death of Cinta. Saw Gerrera and Wilmon's arc revealing that Saw was actually huffing Star Destroyer fuel in Rogue One was wild and very memorable. Just as well, the party with Mon Mothma and Krennic's verbal battle, all while Clea attempted to remove a listening device, was somehow the most stressful scene this season. Oh, by far. Especially when, her hands started bleeding because she was trying to twist that listening device off from, underneath the pedestal. Yeah, that was very tense. Extremely tense moment for that particular arc. Arc 3. Just like in Season 1, he says, the third arc is the peak of the season, with the expected Gorman massacre on full display in absolutely brutal fashion. The culmination of Cyril's character arc was unexpected yet satisfying, with so much being said in his face after Cassian asks, "Who are you?" The intro of K2SO was also equally brutal, making the KX droids seem like invincible killing machines tearing through people at a methodical pace. Shout out to one of my new favorite characters, the hotel clerk, who gets to originate the line, "Rebellions are built on hope." Following the massacre was the spy thriller of Cassian extracting Mon Mothma from the Senate, and that was somehow an even better episode than the previous one. I very much appreciated how they kept the connections to Rebels in this episode while not retconning anything or forcing a cameo from one of those characters. They did throw out the comic one-shot where Cassian met K2, but honestly, as soon as this show was announced, I figured that would eventually happen. I wonder, now that's an interesting question, how many people thought that the or the third episode of that arc, the Mon Mothma speech, how many thought that that episode was better than the Gorman Massacre? I mean, they're excellent in different ways, but is that better than the other? I think everybody collectively agrees, or most people collectively agree, I will say, that the third arc was the best arc of like all the arcs for this particular season, without question. Subjectively speaking, in that regard, just extremely well done, incredible storytelling, and again, hitting real close to home, especially for those of us here in the good old United States of America. Arc 4. Anthony says the final arc starts so strong by beginning the build up to Rogue One, killing off Lonnie, R.I.P., finally delivering backstory for Luthen and Kleya, and solidifying Kleya as a new fan favorite character. The long wait to get to K2 in this show finally ended here, but only for 2 episodes. But it was worth the wait, especially his action scene in the apartment complex and the fun gambling scene. This arc really did make Rogue One such a different movie to rewatch with the way it set things up so nearly perfectly, and adding in the devastating fact that Cassian and Bix had a kid that he didn't know about was such a perfect final shot to end on. I would have liked some mention of Jyn Erso, not a cameo, setting up K2 and Melchi breaking her out of prison. Sure, it can be headcanon to make sense, but everything else was done so meticulously that I was surprised they ignored this. I feel like, first of all, part of me wonders, are we sure we didn't hear her name? Like, I know we heard Galen Erso, but we didn't hear her name at all, like Jyn Erso. Like, I don't know, something tells me we might have heard her name once throughout all that. But either way, you know, I'm okay with it. And as far as like the attention to detail and not mentioning her, you don't need to, because if Galen is mentioned and you know that you got to get to Galen, then it makes sense that when you watch Rogue One next, that you will totally, like, that's the course of the next course of action is to find his daughter, and okay, this is going to be progression. Here's clearly how they're going to find Galen, that type of deal, right? And this, I think, also helped with the fact that I immediately went into my rewatch of Rogue One for the umpteenth time after seeing Andor, after finally watching that last 3 episodes of Andor season 2, so that I could get the full progression in that regard. But either way, he says overall, this was all in all, this is a near perfect show and possibly the best thing to ever come out of Star Wars, especially when put together with Rogue One and the original trilogy. This show does for the original trilogy what the Clone Wars did for the prequels, and I sincerely hope they put together something in that vein for the sequels, as those movies deserve to be elevated like the other trilogies now have been. There are so many little things I loved in Andor that I didn't mention, since every little thing was done so well, such as how all the villains caused their own downfalls, such as Dedra ending up in an Arcana prison. I bet she'd stand on the active floor at night after a few weeks. You know what? You're probably right. She probably did take herself out. Or the great scene with the Force Healer finally bringing that aspect of Star Wars into the show. I also want to note that I thought Benjamin Bratt did a great job as Bail Organa, he says, and I hope that he continues the role if they bring back the character now that Jimmy Smits has begun to age out of the part, and I also hope this gives Lucasfilm more confidence to recast legacy characters rather than use deepfakes. Now, that last part I absolutely agree with, because that's something that they never should have been afraid of in the first place, is go for the recast as opposed to deepfakes. How Paramount and Star Trek has been able to figure that out over the years, and Lucasfilm and Star Wars necessarily hasn't, is beyond me. But either way, he says, can't forget to mention just how politically timely this show is, but it's a shame that the people who need to hear the message lack all forms of media literacy. While this might be the new apex of Star Wars, it's not over yet, and I feel that after Ahsoka Season 2, it will return to being a movie's first franchise, and I hope for the best for everything in development. As for Andor, the rating is, of course, 10 out of 10. That's it for me this week. I have some more to say, but this email has gone on long enough, so I'll save talk on Doctor Who, Mission Impossible, and others for next time. Till then, may the Force be with you, Anthony Dorsey. All right, Anthony. So not quite 70 minutes. The one thing I will say, with respect to your last thoughts on Andor, you said that you feel that after Ahsoka Season 2, it will return to being a movie's first franchise. I am unwilling to make that statement. And the reason I say that is because let's see what The Mandalorian and Grogu does first. And let's see what Starfighter does first. And we know Mandalorian and Grogu is happening, right? We know that that's happening because we've seen footage. Footage has been viewed and observed, right? That release date is going to occur. Here's what we don't know. We don't know if at some point they're all of a sudden going to say, well, we're going to drop it on Disney Plus, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. We don't know that. And they're probably going to stick to their theatrical plan. I'm not suggesting that they're not going to, but I'm saying that the door is open for them to change their minds at any point in time. And also, with respect to it being, like French or movie's first franchise, I mean, it's been a movie's first franchise for decades. And, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about the stuff that really enriches the franchise and really makes it bigger, we're talking about Clone Wars, we're talking about Rebels, we're talking about Mandalorian, we're talking about Andor, we're talking about the shows. So to me, are you concerned that because of the backlash against the Acolyte, that that might be why they go to be movies first? I'm unwilling to say that they're going to do that because I feel like there has been enough success television wise with Disney Plus for them to just not necessarily abandon it, but for them to shift the focus in that regard. They want to get back to doing movies, yes, and they're going to get back to doing movies, but there should be a balance. They should be more along the lines of, a more controlled, less flood the marketplace version of what Marvel Studios is doing, right? Because Marvel Studios obviously is not abandoning the Disney Plus shows by any stretch of the imagination. I know people think they're going to because of how the last few have done in that regard and how the MCU is doing in general. But, I think that has been kind of a blueprint, right? Because they've got some high points there, obviously, with WandaVision and with Loki and, Falcon and Winter Soldier and a couple of others, right? Like, but I think that that's what Lucasfilm should do as well. They should not necessarily put television on the back burner. They should balance the both of them out in that regard. So I am unwilling to agree with you that it's going to return to being a movie's first franchise after Ahsoka Season 2. But we will see. We will see exactly where it goes in that regard. But either way, and I hope they don't. I hope that they allow it to be a 50-50 balance because I don't agree that it should be movies first. I don't agree that it should be TV first. I think it should be 50-50. I don't believe in supremacy of either side because there shouldn't be a side. It's all Star Wars in that regard, whether it's theatrically released or whether it's on the Disney Plus app. So those are my thoughts with respect to what I think Lucasfilm should do for that. But thank you as always for your email, Mrs. Anthony. Greatly appreciated. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on Doctor Who, Mission Impossible, and others. And until then, may the Force be with you as well, sir. So after all that, we have a shorter email from Alex De Silva this week, Flight Chat number 5. He says, "Hey Ray, just a short email this time around. Life with a newborn has been crazy, yet rewarding, so I've mostly been out of the loop from the geeky world." Completely understandable on that one, Alex. What have you got this week? He asks, what are your thoughts on the next 2 Avengers movies being delayed? I think it had something to do with filming beginning while the scripts weren't done yet. I don't know the entirety of the story behind that yet, Alex, but delays don't bother me, especially if a film is already in production and something as high profile with as big of a budget as that film is going to have. It's one of those where it's like, take all the time you need. Whatever needs to be done. I know that we're impatient, we're fans, and of course there's the whole is Marvel dying ridiculous narrative and all that, but take all the time you need to get all your ducks in a row, to get the scripts right, to get everything, coordinated as far as I'm concerned with respect to Marvel and the Avengers films on that. So the delays do not bother me one bit in that regard. And they're not massive delays either. I think they're like a couple months if I'm not mistaken, to be honest with you. But next question he asks, also, I saw something about Dave Filoni taking over Star Wars for Kathleen Kennedy. Is this surprising to you at all, or pretty much as expected? So what this is, Alex, I do know something about this. This was a Hollywood Reporter article that was written by Peter Kiefer, whose writing I'm not very familiar with, but it was a much bigger piece called Inside Hollywood's Succession Wars, a look behind the battle lines of the industry's real-life Game of Thrones, from the ever-shifting power struggles at Disney to the secret machinations at the top agencies. And so a lot of this, he goes like across all of Hollywood, talking about basically what their plans are for the future and for, current studio heads to be succeeded later. And there's a point in the article, the point where we even start talking about Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni, is there's a portion of the piece where it talks about the difference between hiring a replacement from within or hiring a replacement from the outside. And so I'll pick it up a bit from this point because ironically they're talking about Jason Kilar at this point. It says, when discussing the difficulty of selecting new leadership in an embattled industry, one name comes up often, Jason Kilar. Kilar was appointed Warner Media CEO in May 2020, near the middle of AT&T's brief 3-year ownership of the studio. With his degree from Harvard Business School and a tech-heavy CV, the 48-year-old came in with a mandate to shake things up. Sure, he had worked at Hulu, which gave him streaming experience, but he did not come up within the traditional confines of the film and television industry. These days, his 2-year tenure running Warner Media is mostly remembered for Project Popcorn, the pandemic-era decision to release Warner Media's entire 2021 slate of films simultaneously in theaters and on streaming. The move was intended to boost subscriptions to then-fledgling HBO Max, and it did, but Project Popcorn came at a steep cost, and not just in the form of forfeited box office. It strained relations with the agencies and infuriated top talent like Christopher Nolan, who set up his next film, the massive hit Oppenheimer, at rival Universal. Warner's is still dealing with Project Popcorn's fallout. And it says, Kellar's bold moves and harsh comeuppance beg the question, in an age of uncertainty, should Hollywood look to innovative but potentially disruptive outsiders or elevate from within? And there's a quote here that says, Hollywood has always been much more tradition-bound than people think. It has its own rhythms. If the tenet now is to move fast and break things, that's not exactly in sync with the famous phrase, the past is prologue, which still applies to the movie business. And then Barry Diller agrees with this, and he says, quote, hiring from the outside at the CEO level is an admission of failure, says the IAC chairman and former Paramount boss. Ideally, he says, you bring someone in early in their career, and they marinate in your enterprise, gain experience, and succeed whoever is senior. That's by far the better process. Bringing in a CEO whom you don't know, and I don't care how many hours you interview someone you don't know them, is a bad dice throw and rarely works, end quote. And now you see where we're going with this, because this is where it gets into the Lucasfilm part, Alex, where it says, Lucasfilm seems likely to follow that path in replacing Kathleen Kennedy, despite speculation about outside candidates, including former 20th Century head Emma Watts. Insiders say the company seems most likely to promote from within. The current thinking is a scenario where Chief Creative Officer Dave Filoni and production head Carrie Beck, both Lucasfilm vets, take co-head roles. Even as an arm of Disney, Lucasfilm remains in many ways a family business. And as a George Lucas protege, Filoni long has been considered a golden boy. But the knock against him is that he might be too steeped in Star Wars lore and risks steering a show into dense mythology that loses a broader audience. Quote, he's not the Andor guy, he's the Ahsoka guy, says one Disney insider. Beck, who joined the company in 2012, knows the ins and outs, but neither she nor Filoni has much film experience, which could be mitigated by Kennedy's continued presence as a producer on certain Star Wars projects, ensuring quality control in the short term. All right, so that was the piece in this big article from Peter Kiefer about Hollywood succession. That was the part in it about Lucasfilm succession in that regard. And the regurgitators and the bloggers and Scooper Madness ran with that and said, made their own headline like, oh, they're who's going to replace Kathleen Kennedy, and, made it sound like it was a certainty that it was going to happen. You know how that gets spun on the social media cycles and whatnot. So is it an imminent decision? No. They found a paragraph or two in the article that talked about Lucasfilm probably promoting from within and why they would promote from within, and also the struggles and the challenges that could still arise from them promoting from within because Filoni and Carrie Beck don't have the film experience in that regard. So that's all that was, right? Is it more than likely going to happen? Sure, but is it like immediately, part of the immediate time frame? No. The regurgitators ran with it and threw a headline out like, "Oh, it's imminent." No, it's not. Not at all. It's speculation at this point, but it was an indicator that Lucasfilm is probably not going to look outside for a new CEO when Kathleen Kennedy does step down, and even talked about her, still being a producer if it is in fact Filoni and Beck that would help guide their hands, since neither one of them have much producing experience or, in Filoni's case, experience outside of Star Wars. And Lucasfilm is more than Star Wars. I know Star Wars is its biggest IP by far, but it's still Indiana Jones, it's still Willow, it's still a number of other projects as well. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for bringing that up, Alex. As far as his Next Generation watch, he said he watched Allegiance this week. He called it an interesting episode, although the fake Picard was asking way too many suspicious questions. Like, dude, some subtlety could have gotten you a lot farther, he says. Next episode is called Captain's Holiday, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. Yeah, the Picard doppelganger wasn't very subtle at all, and some of the overtures that he was making, his behavior was really off enough that even only like 3 years in, the crew is like, yeah, no, that's not him. That can't be him, right? Like there's something up with him, right? It made the mutiny obvious, even more so from like a fan perspective. It was like, yeah, they put a bell on it in that regard. It wasn't very subtle whatsoever. But Also, it didn't have like, massive nefarious implications at the end of the day. It was still wrong for why they did it, but it was, essentially a double blind study in that regard, if you will. But thank you, as always, for the feedback, Alex. Greatly appreciated. Take care of the family. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope the newborn is doing well. And we will talk to you soon, sir. All right. And finally, we'll close out this week with an email from Jared Cardos. He says, "Hey, Ray, hope you're doing well. Before the rest of the flight chat thoughts, just wanted to say congrats to Alex for the newborn." Yes, indeed. Congrats to Alex on the newborn. "On how the casual audience considers all these characters the same thing," he says. "The example that I always use was that my mom is not a geek, but enjoys some of these superhero flicks like the Thor and Aquaman movies, and at one point, she asked me when Aquaman is going to join the Avengers or team up with Thor. So yeah, it's fairly common." Yes, totally. 100%. It is fairly common. And I know people don't realize that, and certainly fans on social media don't realize that, but it really is fairly common. He says, "As for the whole forgotten Superman thing, it does feel like anyone before Superman the movie gets ignored in general. So specifically George Reeves and Kirk Alyn, which is understandable in some respect. Most fans online providing discourse likely grew up with the Reeve movies and won't venture too deep into anything before that. It also doesn't help," he says, "that it's not available for streaming anywhere, and you can either buy seasons on places like Prime and Apple, buy it physically and only on DVD, or, yo ho ho." Yes, indeed, the pirate's life. He says, "Hell, I only saw episodes of it when it was available on DC Universe before it became solely a comic service, which is a shame, because in a lot of ways I think George Reeves' Superman is up there with the others, and I kind of like his Clark more than, say, Reeves, and it has a lot in common with the 90s DCAU Superman series and Henry Cavill's." I agree with that. As somebody that has seen multiple episodes of that show when it used to air on Nick at Night, I agree with that. I think his Clark Kent is underrated, and so is his Superman. And of course, it's black and white, and the big joke about that Superman is that, bullets would bounce off of him, but if anybody threw a gun at him, he'd have to duck, because obviously, it wasn't like a rubber gun or anything, or I don't know why they didn't, he ducked for guns in that regard. But either way, I'm with you on that. Not a whole lot of respect paid to those, but because it's just, they're too old, right? The generations didn't grow up on it, and so, and he even had his own theme. If we're talking about themes, right? Like go back and you can find this on YouTube. I'm certain you can. Go find the George Reeves Superman theme. It's there, and it's actually pretty awesome, truthfully, as far as an orchestral theme. Even if they did that, like if they just went outside the box and did a variation of that for David Cornswet, that would be cool, because then at least it wouldn't be like so obvious. It wouldn't be like, well, it's the Williams theme or bust, right? Like, I would even be okay with something like that, right? As far as a more original version of that in that regard. But either way, Superman should have more than one theme. He's had more than one theme before. Anyway, Jared says, "I also didn't know about how sports games are shot on TV movies until a few years ago. I actually found out in an interesting short documentary on Netflix called Long Shot. I don't want to say too much. It's about 45 minutes and a very engrossing story, and it involved a person whose life is essentially saved because of that fact." Intriguing. Yeah, this came up because of what we were talking about last week with respect to how they film sporting events for different movies and shows and whatnot. He says, "The soap opera mentions is interesting because while I can't say I've really watched any of those soaps that were mentioned, like General Hospital, Young and the Restless, and the like, I can't say that I'm not a fan of soap operas, because I'm a big reader of superhero comics. Every big superhero character has a bit of soap opera to them, especially the longer they're being published. Just look at the family tree of the Summers family and X-Men, and they'll make even the craziest soap operas look tame. Really the biggest difference that I imagine soaps typically don't have as much science fiction, fantasy, and people in spandex beating the crap out of each other. And speaking of people in spandex beating the crap out of each other, professional wrestling has a lot of that similar DNA too, except those guys perform their stories with massive stunts in front of a live stadium audience." Yeah, I think conceptually speaking, as far as like the stories, yes, the drama and the intensity of certain things, there's definitely the through line, the connective tissue, like the similarities. But I think a big part of the soap opera makeup, especially the ones that we listed, is budget. That's really what it is. So no, it's not going to be science fiction, fantasy, and people in spandex. I mean, you might get people in spandex, but it's not like, well choreographed stunts, and not the best of acting either, right? There have been plenty of actors that have gone back and forth between soap opera television and like regular television and movies and vice versa. But yeah, nothing it's not really a who's who, if you will. Not like a giant vanguard of, hey, here's where you hone your craft and get better and all that. No, not quite. It's a starting point for a lot of people, and it's been a good starting point for a number of actors over the years, but not like a massive Juilliard school or anything like that. Jared says, on your most latest episode, which would have been my flight alert a couple of days ago, while I had a feeling with the creation of DC Studios that what Gunn was talking about was likely the case, I'm glad to see some confirmation from the man himself. The length of 2 hours and 9 minutes seems good. I kind of wish there were maybe a few minutes more, but I'm willing to trust Gunn that he and the rest of the crew were able to do everything they needed and wanted to do with that amount of time. The mention of possible post-credits is interesting, because I seem to remember him saying that he didn't want to copy the MCU mid-credits thing, though maybe he has something different in mind. I guess we'll just have to find out in a little over a month. So I think that'll be enough for me from now, he says. Smaller email than usual, but I get the feeling this is a bit like the calm before the storm, what with Superman and Fantastic Four coming out next month. So in the meantime, good time to catch up on things and maybe share my thoughts here. Looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you, Jared, for the kind words and for the feedback as well. And yeah, as far as the post-credit thing, I'm not willing to make any bold proclamations or any assumptions with respect to that. I will say this, though. As far as him not wanting to do post-credit and mid-credit scenes the same way as the MCU has, that could mean a number of different things, and one could interpret it as, okay, there's still going to be scenes, but what they're not going to be is the format of, teaser to set up the next film and joke, right? Because that's been the pattern with the MCU, is one of them is a teaser to set up the next film, the other is a joke, just at the end of the movie for something to that effect, right? And so, that might be all it is that we're going to have a post-credit scene, there's going to be something at the end of the credits, it's just not going to be well, here's what's up next, the whole, they've kind of done, and I guess, I don't know if people have probably picked up on this, I haven't really talked about it a whole lot, but, the whole so-and-so will return in this film, right? It's like the James Bond effect, if you will, stuff like that, and other films have done this as well, but, I think, at the very core, James Gunn probably at minimum is saying, we're not doing that. We're not just going to give you scenes that just tease you to what's coming up next. And I agree with that. If he changes his mind and decides to do that, it's really not going to bother me. But if he decides not to do that, and if he wants to, put us in a different position, because he has maintained from the beginning that he does want to avoid the homework problem with the DCU. And, I am very curious to see how he can do that as far as making them all standalones that happen in the same universe. I most certainly think it can be done, and I think it's definitely a fresher approach to to take with respect to these characters that certainly can work, especially when you're talking about Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Trinity. I think those three characters are definitely strong enough to carry their own films, and then if you introduce other characters in those movies, and if one of them becomes a breakout star and then they get a solo film or something, or a show or whatnot, then that popularity can carry on in that regard. But it's not a case where, well, you've got to see this in order to understand that. He's trying to avoid that. And I wish him all the luck in the world in him hopefully trying to avoid that. But it also could mean that the post-credit scenes, if there are any post-credit scenes or mid-credit scenes, could be structured differently as well. It doesn't have to be the tease and the joke like the MCU has done, historically speaking, throughout its first 17 and a half years of existence, if you will. I say first 17 and a half, that's really first 17 and a half. I mean, that thing has been going on for nearly 2 decades, 36 movies. The 37th film will be Fantastic Four First Steps. So I hear you on that, Jared. This may very well be the calm before the storm. I'm sure we're going to get some more emails leading up to it about some stuff going on. But yeah, we're almost inside a month out from the beginning of Super Fantastic. So we'll see how it goes. But of course, as always, Jared, thank you for the feedback. Greatly appreciated. Before signing off, I did want to mention this one YouTube comment. This came from at mwamba85dt, who posted on the last Flight Chat episode. He said, "Hey, this is Daryl Taylor. I subscribed to your YouTube channel a week ago. I love your channel and positive talk surrounding nerd talk and culture. No toxic gatekeeping or anything. Keep up the great work. Be blessed." Daryl, I appreciate the thought on that. I did respond to you on the YouTube channel, the Flightcast YouTube channel. I do appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I do hope that I can, continue the positive talk and, not do the toxic gatekeeping. If I ever get frustrated or negative about anything, it will be about the talk, about the negative talk, not about the actual franchises and what we're seeing themselves in that regard. As far as whether we like or dislike movies, TV, and other sort of media, we can absolutely agree to disagree on any of that, and want to try and keep that chatter positive, as positive as possible, because there's more than enough negative chatter, at the behest of creatives, at the behest of writers, directors. Studios are a different beast, because then you can talk about what is the CEO doing, what is somebody like David Zaslav doing, what's somebody like Bob Iger doing. Is this really a smart decision for them with respect to how they're doing with fans? But a lot of it, if we have anything to gripe about, is fan behavior, and we try to keep the talk positive surrounding nerdity itself. And definitely no gatekeeping, certainly no gatekeeping whatsoever. All is welcome as far as viewpoints and whatever your favorites are, whatever your biases are, because bias is not a bad word as long as you were a fan and, not a journalist trying to report some objective news in that regard. But yeah, I hear you on that. Thank you for the kind words. He also mentioned he replied later and mentioned if I had seen the comment about Gunn's tweet about, which I had referenced in the last Flight Chat, about how, we can see both Superman and Fantastic Four and there's no need for the fan war BS. Absolutely, there is no need for the fan war BS, and I will never perpetuate that, ever. I'm seeing Superman, and I'm seeing Fantastic Four First Steps. And you know what? If I get a chance to watch Jurassic World Dominion beforehand and do my rewatch of Fallen Kingdom as well, I might end up seeing Jurassic World Rebirth, when the month of July starts. So there's that as well, right? July could be a really awesome month, and I hope it is a really awesome month for us nerds and us fans. It could be a lot of good stuff to watch at the cinema, a lot of good times to enjoy, a lot of great discussions to be had. Here's hoping, fingers crossed. There's going to be some noise, there's going to be some mess, no doubt about it, but hopefully there's enough there for us to remain positive and have some good positive chatter on. So thank you, David Taylor, for your kind thoughts and for subscribing to the Flightcast YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate that. And that'll do it for a somewhat shorter version of Flight Chat. Just 4 or 5 emails here, but some longer ones. Well, no, not 4 or 5 email participants, if you will, because there were a lot of emails from John R. that we got through. Thank you for those. We did get a missive from Anthony Dorsey, and he has promised to send another one talking about Doctor Who and Mission Impossible. Thank you for your thoughts as well, Anthony. And of course, thank you to Alex and Jared as well for your feedback. And thank you to Daryl Taylor for your YouTube posting, if you will, at the Flightcast YouTube channel. And thank you to all of you for listening to this show. Thank you for all of you for your support to the Flightcast Podcast Network. If you have any thoughts that you want to share here in the feedback circle on movies, TV, and other sorted media, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the Flightcast, on BLUESKY at Flightcast. There is the Flightcast YouTube page that you can comment on the episode under this, like Daryl Taylor did earlier. There's a Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.